kind of break with the rules of the World Postal Union of the mid-19th centuries. So Georgia is, as we know, is a relatively not so rich country like Russia in terms of GDP per capita, in terms of total GDP. It's a much smaller country. It's 4 million people versus 142 million people in Russia. And 70% of Georgian foreign trade was going to Russia, and import also was coming from Russia. What was the result of this total economic and trade and transportation blockade on Georgia? Now we have results of year 2007, the first year of this total blockade. Russian GDP grew 8%. Georgian GDP grew 12.4%. Russia's foreign direct investment into Russia slightly exceeded 1% of GDP, but without FDI to oil and gas, it's much less. It's about 0.7% of GDP. In Georgia, that does not have neither oil, nor gas, nor huge natural resources. It is more than 12% of GDP. And those numbers show what can be achieved with policies of freedom, with policies of liberty, with right policies, with right institutions, and with right people who introduce those policies. That is much more important than national resources, than the violence, and than aggression. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrei. We have time for questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and identify yourself and your affiliation, and wait for the microphone to reach you, please. We have a question in the back.
Ashley March from Cato. Kakha, I was wondering in your country about the media.
Could you turn up the sound or speak closer to the microphone, please?
I was wondering in your country about the media. Are they economically literate, and how is the press reporting on all of these reforms?
I think that if we are talking about printed, and not only printed, but in printed media, I think that they are 100% against reforms. Our press, our newspapers, our magazines, they are 100% supportive not to make these reforms, and they are against government. In electronic media, the situation is a little bit different, but mainly I can say that the main modus operandi of our journalists, not all of them, of course, but most of them, is to be very critical. I think it maybe there is nothing very special, because you cannot make good newspaper supporting government and talking that life is very good and there is no scandals. So I think it's normal, and I am one of the most hated person in our printed media, for example.
Any other questions? Take a question right here, and yes.
I'm Helen Raphael, Resources for the Future, and I'm wondering what measures are taken to protect your natural resources from rapid depletion, and also to protect the environment in general.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think that there is different types of natural resources. If you're talking about mineral resources like some deposits, they should be depleted because that's the nature of them. Because I'm having some, for example, we have not very quite small copper mine. So I mean, preserve a copper mine, not to deplete it from copper is, I think, useless. It was created by God to be depleted for human beings. And if we are talking about nature as it is, I think that there is several things. There is no one receipt for one answer for all of this. First of all, of course, we have reserve territories, and they are quite significant part of Georgia, and you cannot have any type of activity there. And long term, I think that the recreation capacity of Georgia can be much more than any other types of economic outcomes from using natural resources. Sorry? Yeah, trees. Trees. I think that one of the best way to preserve forests is to have them in private ownership. Private ownership, and if there is a will of nation, the regulation of logging. There is an institution which is based in New York, which is called the Tropical Forest Research Institute, which is affiliated with the United Nations. It's very pro-protective, and they make a research about tropical forests, and in countries where tropical forests can be privately owned and commercially used, the level of conservation is much higher than in countries that when there is no commercial use of tropical forests, or there is heavy regulation, no private ownership on that. I think that's only one evidence for about tropical forests. About our country, I think that we have different regions of Georgia, and in western Georgia mainly there is historical legacy of which forest belongs to whom. It's not formal, because formally they are owned by government, and I can say that if you go either in the most difficult time when there was no electricity, for example, people were taking care about their forest, and they all know where is the margin of this forest, despite that there is no formal documents about that, and they were not allowing other people to cut trees in their forest. So I think that that's one of the things which is important. That cannot be the only thing, because I think that I'm unfortunate to say, but the best way to preserve nature is not to have human beings at all. That's I think not achievable, and not what we are working for. So I think that that's a trade-off, always a trade-off. But I think in that area there is a lot of myths, and what is good, what is bad. And I think that my country is very beautiful, and I want to repeat that I think that the beauty of Georgia can generate in future more economic wealth than just logging or drilling or whatever. But it does not mean that we should do that by some uneconomic means, by keeping everything in state property and thinking that that's good.
We'll take a question right here.
Maybe I'll stay there.
You want to stay?
Much more comfortable.
Thank you. Ana Lucia Coronel, Mission Chief for...
Can you speak louder, please?
Yes.
Maybe something is with the microphone. I don't know.
Okay. You hear me? Okay.
Speak strong.
Yeah, this is Ana Lucia Coronel, the Mission Chief for Georgia from the IMF. I just have a comment and a question. My comment relates to inflation and the central bank. What does the IMF believe about that? The IMF believes that inflation should be the main objective of the central bank. And in that regard, we welcome very much in our conversations with the authorities during the mission that the central bank law was reformed to state that price stability is the main objective of the central bank. Regarding independence of the central bank needs independence to get this main objective. And in that regard, what we believe is that the central bank doesn't need to have any interference from parliament or other political stances. And that's also what we discussed during the mission. And we welcomed a lot that the automatic dismissal of the central bank president was dropped from the draft legislation, which was very important. And we welcome very much that the legislation that was approved it takes into account a vote from Parliament, but not an automatic dismissal. So just for clarification. And then my question is related to inflation. How do you see the inflation outlook in the next months, given